So, coming back from compulsion. Hi, Leroy.
Hey, Lori.
Lori and Leroy here with Strong Island. Today we're talking about tempering our will. And we've come to this place kind of in response to considering compulsion. And before that was passions, actually. And we kind of found let's step away and we have to make this kind of extra little trek to outline a few other things and then maybe come back to it because passions was a little bit hard to identify. Um, all related and sometimes not, but at least it is nice to be in a place like you had said last time where we're talking and thinking in ways that we're maybe not always used to. So when we think of compulsions, I guess it starts with our finishing thought was that pause before we involve ourselves in some type of experience, whether as a response or as a loyalty, whatever you want to call it. So if you just look at an experience, the two things that we can't do without are feeling and impulse that lead us to that. And there's some decision making that comes with those. So we have to ask ourselves when it comes to why even temper our will, to what end and what's the point? First of all, the assumption is that there is some type of good for us. There are some choices that are better for us than others. And we're also creations made with reason. And there has to be a reason for that, not to be redundant. But once we begin to exercise some will and unique to ourself and to our heart and kind of loyal to that, we get a chance to have revealed to us some of our desires we weren't aware of, but we can see when we're kind of pulled back from them through discipline. So if you look at it like when I can't fulfill a desire, do I feel like some type of freedom has been taken from me? A lot of times we do. Like sometimes I want to just do something. I wish I could get this or get that or do this or do that. And it to the point that it feels as if I've lost some kind of free will or freedom that I cannot, or that I cannot serve that and also stay on the path that I'm on. So we have to grow up at some point, I guess. And part of that growing up comes with this ability to kind of organize ourselves from within versus just impulsively responding to everything and being able to determine what's worthwhile. And that comes through being able to stick to that plan requires tempering our will, at least for where I'm coming from. What do you think about this, Leroy, so far?
Okay, well, I got so much to say about this.
Excellent.
Thank you for this topic. I give you all the glory because this is your instruction, and you said this is what we're going to talk about. And
Yeah, it didn't sound like it when I was first talking, right? But yeah.
As the older sibling, I just say okay, and I head off to work. So one of the things that you mentioned, and I'm going to kind of go through this when we're talking about tempering our will. First off, one of the things you said, what do you think about this? And there are substantial likenesses to the manipulation and enhancement of metal by way of hardening, tempering, and annealing that resemble the tempering of our will. Now, when I first was introduced to this topic, when you first told me about it, I started to do my research. I'm like, wow, that's pretty heavy. And I started to kind of try to come up with some verbal romance with the subject. And this is what I discovered. First and foremost, the will to live is rivaled by little else.
Ooh.
So why is it that the will to heal is so easily dismissed? When healing is a very important component of living. So now I'm like, okay, Leroy, you got something. Let's kind of go with this a little bit further. As with all of our conversations, we're not the rule and guide, but bring forth discussions for consideration. So again, all of this they're just thoughts between a pair of twins stumbling through our existence. Um, so as I was thinking about healing, do we refrain from healing because pain validates the existence of emotions, love, belonging, commitment, passion? I mean, is that why we're not quick to heal? Because it gives us purpose, which was part of our earlier conversations. Healing implies that there's an injury, physical, mental, emotional. There's some type of injury. And I started thinking about, like, how do I deal with that? What's my will to recover? And I know we're talking about two totally different things, but for me, when I talk about will, the first thing that comes to mind is the will to survive,
Right.
the will to live, the will to be strong, the will to heal. And so I kind of start going through this, and I always think of it in three distinct actions in a very predictable course for systematic repair. There's hurt, there's anger, and then I'm done.
Wait,
And I can always kind of...
Brother, I'm sorry, could you tell me one more time? Hurt,
anger, and done.
Okay.
And that's as simple as I can make it, because whether I'm hurt emotionally, physically, there's that hurt. And then I'm angry. I'm angry because I let somebody hurt me. I'm angry because I wasn't more cautious and sustained a physical injury. But when I go through things in this fashion, my timeline always lets me know where I'm at and that the end is in sight, because I'm hurt, then I'm angry, then I'm done. And done is really what I'm after, because done means that my will was triumphant, and my will to heal, my will to return to a pre-injury posture, or to a pre-injury posture, is complete. So I don't know if that's what you were thinking, but when I talk about tempering our will, I immediately, it's starting to kind of, there's a familiarity with the way we do things, because I'm starting to kind of put things on their head a little bit, at least for me, or certainly a combative nature, where you say tempering our will, and I know we have a will to do a lot of things, but for me, the most important is the will to live, and the will to live well, the will to live healthy. Now, our will, I mean, it's amazing. I guess one of the things that I need to say is that it's amazing because it was gifted to each of us, and its usefulness is completely at our discretion. So I have to also think about the dangers of our will. And the dangers of our will, I mean, it sounds very noble, like, wow, the will to heal, the will to live, the will to live well. Those all sound so noble. The challenge is that we become so enthusiastic about the triumph that we begin to exercise our will on other people.
Oh my gosh.
And we become somewhat enthusiastic to have them adopt our will.
Yes.
And I've struggled with that. I can't lie. It's like I have this untrammeled vision in my head.
You?
Of me. I know, go figure.
No, I don't see that at all.
So this is the part where tempering our will has relevance to me, because I have to temper my will to have other people, to make my will somebody else's will. you know, like,
Yeah,
why
or
can't
at
they
least
just have
make
their
some
own?
room for them, right? So they can, at minimum, live well, and live healthy, even though they see everything different,
Okay, yeah,
right?
I like that.
This the triumph. Go on. I'm sorry. I just
So as I understand it, there's an internal will and a very, which is kind of um, beyond us. It's an internal, and then there's our conscience,
right.
which has got a will. So this is going to be a tough subject, but I want to tell you that I try to look at the obvious. For instance, when somebody is in a situation where death is imminent, the body has such a will, this is that internal, has such a will to live that we become first non-ambulatory, and then the body, the mind is so powerful. Without seeking agreement from us, will begin to shut down of first your movements and then your non-vital organs. And the will to preserve the mind is above everything. And ultimately, that is the only living organ that is fed by a reduced heart rate. And that's where our internal will is found. The body's will to exist will preserve at all costs the mind. It's beautiful in a very truthful yet macabre way. I know it is. It really is. But that's kind of what I came up with. I mean, and it's mind boggling that
Absolutely.
this is how we operate. This is how our body operates. And so those are the considerations that I bring to the table, Lori.
That's
Help me.
I like that. That's interesting because it's to me it's my first thing I was thinking, or the last thing I was thinking as you were finishing was like, well, good thing we have that part of our body, that system that does what's most right, because and automatically. Because can you imagine, given a choice and given distraction, given whims, given compulsions, and it's like, I like that leg. And a lot of lives have been saved because of the order of the way that the body will preserve things. Somebody in cold temperatures, right, may have made it because the body was orderly as it should be. They may have a couple less toes or fingers, but they made it because the body has done what preserves that life. And then you go into the healing aspect and the living well in the health, which to me could share the same answer with what you just identified about, like this physiological condition that we're trying to point to something higher and at the same time something deeper in us, the heart. And it comes down to the same answer, at least what I heard and what you were saying, prioritizing. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's all about prioritizing and knowing what's most important.
It's not going to get better than that. Drop the mic. We're done. Wrap it up.
So what he said.
That is so true. That is so true,
Yeah,
Lori.
it speaks exactly about knowing what matters most and serving that as priority. So
Beautiful.
that's it. And I'm really glad you decided to, I don't know, like that, it may have even been a supernatural coming down upon you that you said this, because that's what I'm hearing. And it's also not exactly what I planned, but it's right. I say over and over on this show, the natural in this world points to the supernatural. We see the models over and over, and we see it, like life's kind of obvious in that way. Now, like you said, you have to make room for other people's approaches. But for me and my experience, this seems to be true repeatedly. And so the body also, when we do this prioritizing, I see this just completely like in line with tempering our will. And part of tempering our will involves a firmness to what's most important and also a willingness to let go of things that aren't, even that will be painful, even that could be devastating should you survive. It's still not as important as what has been already pre-selected as vital or most fundamental, right? And I think so when it comes to matters of our will and kind of having, I guess, a type of discipline, that tempering, which implies also an action. So it's tempering means we're actively changing and making stronger our will because we are not automatic. We don't just have a system that kicks in and does what it should, what it ought to do, which is the word ought with your will, right? But instead, we have to kind of develop that for ourselves because we have the free will. We have the freedom to go against our nature should we choose to, right? And as we learn more in life and we become more diverse, if you want, we also introduce a whole lot of competing things into our life, ideas, things that we believe need our attention, and we can become a little bit more fragmented. But the key in what you're saying, and then I'm going to go right back to you so that you can correct or expand on this for me, is to be able to take a look at other things, but somehow utilize them to better identify what's most important, and at the same time to not let go of what's most important for competing or things outside of us competing for this precious attention and prioritizing. Now you fix all that. You're up.
Can you imagine? Can you just for a second, just close your eyes and imagine that there is a harmony between our very conscious will and that internal will to survive and survive well.
Oh my gosh.
Like, can you imagine if those two were in sync?
That's what
but we are burdened, Lori. We are. I mean, you bring up a really, really good point. I mean, we're burdened by a worldly, and I don't want to get too far off here or sound as crazy as we actually are, but can you imagine if we were not burdened or weighed down by society's ideals, and all we did was work to create this harmonious dance between our very conscious and internal wills. And it was like about, and I always hate to get into a very biblical, conversation, but I've always felt that, the greatest sin was not living the life we were intended to live.
Yes.
The life that our inner will wants us to live, we don't want to, I mean, and that bleeds over into everything. Our body just wants to survive, and it wants to survive in comfort. If you are sore, rest. If you're, it's that simple. And yet we complicate it. We muck it up with all these.
And we love to.
influences.
We take delight in mucking it up. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, like,
no, that's the hard part to swallow for me.
How many
it's good
people,
fun.
You know what? Forget people. How many times of your life have you tried to manipulate your will to enjoy something that was just not good for you?
Lots.
How many times? A relationship.
That's what I was.
A purchase. Gambling. I don't say gambling like it's a bad thing. I'm just saying, like, how many times have we done something? I'm playing off of, last week's compulsion topic. But how many times have we tried to manipulate our will. But you can't, because your will is your will. I mean, we like what we like, and it's really much simpler than, or it's not much more challenging or complicated than living free. You know, that's our will first and foremost, and everything else outside of that could be, I mean, at least this is a consideration, is us stepping in and messing up what's otherwise perfect.
Absolutely. And the only thing that I think we will fall into reckoning for or have to answer for is when we have interfered or distracted somebody else in the same way. Because it's like we're not happy enough with our own self-destruction. We now want to go about being destructive, because that, my brother, is the work of the devil. Across religions, and those who hold no religion at least can have a visual of and imagine what I'm speaking about.
So without introducing, brimstone and fire and damnation and all this other stuff, there's just something internal that we know that it's just not classy to violate or impede another person's will.
Right.
I mean, we know that. We're just like, come on, that's in us. That's, and yet sometimes our will is so strong, so absolute, so artificially bolstered up with a feeling of superiority and rightness that we want to do that. And that's dangerous. I don't like that. Have I done it before? Absolutely. Am I proud of it? Nope. Why am I talking in a third person? I have no idea.
Lori agrees.
It's a beautiful thing. So now let's go back to like tempering our will. I mean, is it really so simple that we just need to recognize instances where our will poses discomfort, a threat, or even just weight or pressure on another's will? Maybe. I mean, it's probably not a bad place to start, and like just kind of look for opportunities. I heard something a long time ago, and it was very powerful. I mean, to this day, it is like so simple and so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
That is, relax. You don't have to be wrong for somebody else to be right.
Right. I like that.
And when we're talking about our will, tempering our will, it's okay, I think, sometimes to publicly subdue our will so that everybody can enjoy the same absolute righteous perfection of will.
Right.
Will is a funny thing, because will is so powerful that our will by the very vocabulary definition, our will intends to live on even beyond our existence, in that we leave a will behind because we want to govern even in our passing.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So, I've often thought, okay, so I have a daughter, so how am I going to govern? How am I going to exercise my will from the grave? And you know what? Saying it out loud sounds really funny.
I bet you've drawn some papers, though. Let's be honest, both of us probably
absolutely.
have. That's
absolutely.
I feel
Without
like that's my responsibility with my son.
And it's so perfect in my head that I'm immortalizing my will with a will.
Yes. And I think that part's like okay, because when I'm looking at it, still kind of fixated on what you said at the beginning, is that a fundamental to your existence. You know, if a person believes that your highest living requires this and that, is that something that we think would knock you right off of living as you should and being who you should be? I would say that's not a fundamental. This is just my in the moment opinion, not even thought out. So more of a reaction, I guess. But I think things like that, when they come up, you can address it. But first, the heart and needs to kind of be in charge. And we have to remember that the will and the mind, everything else we're talking about, are faculties and of the heart, ideally, to reach those three things that you said for living, right? And that's using that as a guide, because my belief is that we have what we need. And whether people agree or not, which can make its own interesting conversation, that is kind of the premise here behind all of our conversations. No getting around that. But so given what you're saying about controlling things and like this active participation in the will of others, whoa, put the brakes. I sounded very Spanish, put the brakes. But what if we say, okay, I start with me and I first examine my interest before I worry about what everybody else is interested in, and have I selected for myself what should be central, which I need to toss out. And then you do your own kind of internal demoting and promoting of your actions, behaviors, and even thoughts. Some thoughts we gotta fire, you know. So the cliche of people living rent free in your head. Some you gotta toss out. You know, if you didn't like somebody and they've been gone, and yes, I'm speaking to you, Leroy, and to me for this, and they've since passed. Do we still allow them to knock around in our head, or do we have to say, listen, this is a distraction, or there's a good reason, and it takes that. I'm not saying yes or no to it, but I am saying that I would advocate for what you said previously, the pause. Take a pause and examine it. Because a lot of times we spend a lot of time, because it's a little less effort and a whole lot more gratification to evaluate what other people are doing. It's a whole lot more painful and messy and confusing and embarrassing to evaluate ourselves, right? What do you think? So it's like, I think that's why we fall into kind of giving into the compulsion to judge other people before ourselves. Maybe it's a kind of projection of working out what we think about ourselves. I don't know. That gets into territory I don't know enough about. But I do know, based on what you're just saying about controlling people, which I didn't even think about that today. Can I say controlling people? How did you put it?
Just definitely, being more in love with our own will than somebody else's.
Right. You know, I recently had heard somebody, and I hear people say this all the time, where this tendency to like compare Eastern thinking versus Western, and one of the universal things that people tend to like, and I also really have a healthy respect for, is this idea that the body of one of a community is more important than the individual, and so we serve that. And kind of the thing that people don't often mention is that means that they must set that aside to serve the body. The other thing that I think is overlooked when people say, oh, well, the way that this group did it, or this group, and really they're amazing because they all were together. Everybody thinks that's a good idea because they're injecting that together somehow would be the way they see things. But you'd have to consider the idea, do we live like that if it's the guy next to me's way of doing it? Am I still going to sign up? Because I don't think it always means what we think it means. And it makes it like kind of more evident that we can quickly say, I don't like how this guy would do it, but if we did it, we could all do it. I can tell you this, I've gone far enough to, like, as an amusement or passing time, I don't know why, to picture what if life really was the way that I think it should be. I can tell you this, none of us would be here very long. It's not sustainable. And I think, because I haven't given it that thought. But then I'll still march out of here and I'm going to try to boss you later today. What gives? Like, how do I work on that? Like, is there a practicality we can do, or is this just I toss in ideas, but now what? How would I avoid doing that somehow?
So first, I'm going to say, when you say "put the brakes," it's okay because we actually are Hispanic. So I don't want to offend anybody when you say you sound Hispanic. I mean,
I sound like me.
That's right. You sound like you.
Yeah.
Um, so how do you, how do you temper that will? How do you?
I got nothing now. I thought I did. But...
kind of keep it in alignment. I think it starts by just acknowledging the power of our will. I mean, strong. We are literally here dedicating 38 minutes, 40 minutes to tempering our will. That's a start.
There was already some kind of surrender
we know
to
there's
that.
a problem.
Yeah. Like we already yielded that there's something that needs.
We're not talking about tempering our will because it's a non-issue. We're talking about tempering our will because we need to temper our will.
I wish I said that the first show I ever did. We're not talking about this because we've got it. We're talking because like something's gone wrong. We're here to work it out.
That's right. We need
but like, just if you had to guess really sloppy and maybe right, maybe wrong, what would you tell me, like, is something that I could practically try? First, there's recognizing it and being here, right? And then what? Following through on it, or?
I think I tell my daughter this. When there are problems that are just insurmountable, and we all have them, this being one of them, I always tell my daughter, I say, put your problems down and work on somebody else's problems.
What?
I tell her,
what does that mean?
Put your problems down, because you can't fix them. You're hyper-focused. The problems are bigger than life. So set it to the side and work on somebody else's problems, because they're easier. And oftentimes, the answer is found in somebody else's problem. So you asked me, how would you start? And I'd say, well, start by putting your will on the back burner and work on somebody else's will.
Yeah. Okay. I do strongly believe that, because when I don't know what to do with myself, I usually think then just get to work for somebody else and kind of in service, and you're already kind of doing something, that you should be doing. Are we saying the same thing? Or do you mean, okay. I mean, like, as a physical act, go out and volunteer, because there's perspective there.
It's not volunteer. It's like, your spouse, your significant other, I mean, they have a will. Work on their will for a little bit, whatever that may be.
Oh, so like work on serving, like kind of doing what's in their will?
Yeah.
Until you run into a problem, and then you can be like, now I know why it doesn't work. Wait.
Wow. That's a big statement.
Did I? Not the spirit that was said in, right? Sorry. I just want to be included.
Yeah. No, yeah, well done. I think that you're right. I mean, I think it's that simple. Tempering our will means just making a conscious decision to set it aside. How do you temper it? You put it on the sideline. You could still wear a jersey, you're just not going to be on the field. You know
what? I like that, because at least you're saying until. I want to try to kind of expand on that, because I just pictured when you said that, it's like, we're not saying you haven't developed, you can't do it, but what we're saying is, like, when we go out with our will in a kind of a forceful, bossy way out into the world, without having a look at it, we could be doing damage. So a good first step is, like, at least before you start doing good, let's at least kind of level, neutralize the damage, to cool it. Like just not that it
You know
needs to
what?
be dramatically damaging. Go ahead.
Just like the last topic we had, pause. And not just pause, but pause, identify, and define someone else's will. You don't got to figure it out. You don't got to subscribe to it. You don't have to do anything. But there is healing just in yielding long enough to find out what their will is.
And describe.
We don't got to fix it. We don't got to correct them. We don't have to do anything. We don't even have to display our will. We just have to, before we do anything with our will, when it comes to another person, maybe we just stop long enough to identify their will. And then once we identify it, run it over. No, I'm just kidding. We don't run it over.
I was just scratching out. So when you're like pause, identify, describe, I was like the PID.
Because you know
the
what?
PID of love. And then I was
I'll
scratching
bet
it
you.
out. Go ahead.
I'll bet you if we did more of that, we may even pirate other people's will and claim it as our own. Because there's a lot of interesting passions out there.
Right, and it
wills
might
out
look
there.
different if you don't project your, not your, let me see mine. It might look a little different if I don't project my filthiness upon what they're doing. If I don't right away say, when I do something that looks like that, it means that I don't like this, or it means that I'm doing this, because that's all I know about it, is what that particular behavior means when I do it. I don't know without that pause, identification, and being able to actually describe where they're coming from. I don't know, I don't have that information. So all I'm applying is when I make my face like that, that's my angry face. That could be their pain face, right?
So let's just put a little bow on this segment.
Okay.
And say that for your consideration, maybe we go out and do nothing more than identify the will of the person in front of me. Are they trying to teach me? Is that their will? Are they trying to harm me? Is that their will? Are they trying to share? Are they trying to, and the most noble of all wills, are they just trying to survive, live, and live well?
Have they just prioritized survival? Because people can act different ways in the throes of survival. And what I thought looked like this or that, my goodness, they're just preserving their life. And I didn't like how that looked. Shame on me. We're not saying shame on anybody else, but like it's a possibility. I'm picturing myself being very customer service about it. So what I hear is you're feeling angry that didn't work. But we don't want to do that, right? It's a more personal, intimate thing.
Lori, I think this is good. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I hope beyond hope that this does something for anybody listening. I can't wait till we get to a point where we can have call-ins and other participants. I am so excited as I go through this with you to find out what other people are thinking. And as we knock on 38 minutes, I got to just say, thank you, Lori. Thank you for bringing this topic to the table. Thank you, Strong Island, for giving us a platform to discuss this and kind of learn how to lace up our shoes and maybe make better progress.
Yeah, I like this. And so I'm going to actually go home and practice this pause, identify, describe before I, just like do anything else when Steve gets home.
With that, I love you.
Yes.
Thank you. And I can't wait for the next topic.
Thank you so much for joining us. I love you, brother. I'll talk to you a little later, okay? And I'm going to try,
Okay.
I'll try to do some PID work with you.
like it.
Piddling. All right. Love you.
Bye.
Until next time, everybody, please farewell.